here. There we go. So I don't know if you noticed or had any thoughts. I do want to do our usual check-in around the topic of oversight. So I would kind of turn it to you in the beginning here and just have you give some thoughts and comments around what you feel oversight is, and is it relevant, and why, and what your thoughts are just in general around that topic.
What type of oversight are we talking about? Just in general, overseeing your people, or overseeing operations, like from a higher level? Like, what level do you want to talk about?
I would say let's start high up and kind of really look at it in a broad perspective first. And then, we can get into aspects of it. That's the way I kind of look at it, just to kind of give you a primer, I guess. I look at there's three primary components to operations. One is vision and structure as one component. The structure is based on a vision and purpose. The second component is oversight. And then the third component to me in the big three, the third one is to evolve through strategic planning. But I feel oversight is at a high level a critical component of operations in general. And then yes, there are several aspects of that. So starting from there, if that helps at all in your thoughts.
Yeah, sure. So I think from a high level, like, I guess I always end up bringing up problems, but you need good oversight from a top level. I've always had this concept since working at Cardinal Glass back in the day, where that people, especially in America, for whatever reason, we all want to be independent and different, but everybody really just craves that structure and that oversight, and that's because people want recognition. And so, when you're developing this stuff, like, oversight is what brings recognition to people too. So many times when people are implementing oversight, they do, they make it aggressive and it seems mean and people don't like it. So
do you think oversight can have a negative connotation?
Well, yeah, because oversight includes holding people accountable to what needs to get done, right? Like, if you're going to oversee something, it's not good enough to just look at this thing from whatever level you're at and be like, yep, this is what we need to do, or yep, this is what we're doing, right? You actually need to say, this is what we're doing. Hey, like, we're off track here. What do we need to do about that? So there's an accountability piece to it that people don't like. They like the results, right? They like being able to say, like, oh yeah, we're doing great stuff, but people don't always like, on the first blush, the accountability. Although I do find that if you do it right, people actually do like that, because people want to know their boundaries. And without boundaries, how do you really operate? And people get ambiguous, and that's when you start feeling, when you're in a role that doesn't have good oversight, when nobody's giving you oversight, you start to flounder, right? Like, you start to, like, you're hitting this, and now it's a hit and miss. And if you don't really have good feedback, like, it doesn't feel as rewarding. So I think oversight is what brings that reward. I think it's necessary. And you got to do, like we're talking about with the, yearly thing and stuff, like, you got to bring it back to home every now and then, because, like, even right now, Point North, we're about to do more stuff on this tomorrow, or, well, no, not tomorrow, later today. Just rehashing your goals and making sure that everything's in line with where you want to be, because when you, in a small business, move off of that, when your oversight starts to slip or your goals change, so you're not overseeing the right stuff anymore, like, that's when people start to grasp at what they know, like, that's when you start to go for shiny, or for quick money, or for whatever, right? Whatever, and you stop being as unified. So that's why you got to bring in that oversight to bring those things back into focus. That's kind of my rambling answer for you there.
No, I think that's good. I always like to look at a topic of, you know, and you did this perfectly from a standpoint, what does it look like when it's good? And then what does it look like when there's lack in it? And that's a really good way for people to really look at a subject. They may not see it for what it is, but often they can see it for when it's not.
Right.
And so you talked about stop being unified on that. I'm trying to expand on my thoughts on that a little bit more. Do you have any other things, any examples maybe, or thoughts on that?
On when it ceases to be unifying? Yeah.
Right.
So
what leads to that maybe?
It's ambiguous. Like, you know, I always end up going back to the goals and stuff, but it's ambiguity, right? It's when the oversight, it depends. Like, so if we take it to like a project management level, right? Because it kind of applies to other levels if you want to take the metaphor that far. Like, you know, when you get to where you're like, okay, everybody kind of knows where we're going, and then, you know, you start to add in things, so your scope creeps, which happens to our goals and everything every year. So that's starting to creep, and then you're just expecting your SMEs to do what needs to get done, because, you know, if you start doing that and you're not actually providing that guiding line, and you're letting the scope creep more and more, then people start to do what interests them the most, or what is the most critical in front of their face thing now, right? They stop doing the thing that's the best for the company overall, despite short-term pain for long-term growth. People won't do that unless there's a unified goal on the back end and oversight that draws that line and holds you in that lane heading that way, because, you know, it's just not natural. People flow to what's easiest. So that's kind of where I think that starts to happen. And it happens good naturedly, right? It happens with people being like, I could take that on. Like, yeah, I can do that. And yeah, I can do that. And hey, this is a great opportunity. Let's do this, right? And then, but as somebody's exploring that great new opportunity, something else is slipping, something else isn't getting done. And that's where you have to have that strategic oversight on the top level saying like, hey, that's awesome, but let's not forget this is our goal, and this is where we're going. And does that awesome thing really fit in? Or do we need to realign ourselves because this is such a great opportunity? But if you don't have those discussions, then you're just this thing. It's you know, the pumpkin plan guy, Mike Michalowicz or whatever, would have a heart attack. He'd be, you know, he'd be like, what are you doing? Or I don't remember, that's, or the E-Myth guy, all those people, they'd be like, hey, how come you're going off on these shiny objects? But that's what happens when you start to not have oversight, because, you know, I live in the tech world. So the client calling you and in your face right now, if you don't track it, they're going to get the business before the client that's being respectful of your time. And that's the wrong thing to train your people to do, your clients.
Right. So one of the things that I would like to do is break it down a little bit more into so I look at oversight in trying to break that thought down. Like I said, I'm you know, doing a breakdown here of oversight is one of the primary components of the three. And then within oversight, I like to look at it from you know, oversight to me equals management. Really, it's somebody managing, or it's part of management. And the first thing, when you're assigned within the hierarchy, you're assigned an area of focus. So I like to look at, as we are doing and talking about oversight, to me, it's about focus areas. Does that, do you have any thoughts on that at all?
On the focus areas? Yeah. So, I mean, right. It depends on the size of your organization and stuff too, but yeah, you have to have somebody, and that's where you start getting into like the SME level and stuff too, right? And I guess it really depends. My thing is, with a small business, it's hard to get to good focus areas because people are doing so many things. We've talked about that before.
Right.
But it's still important to know who's in charge of what. And that's where we actually had some good success, right? Like, and that was something that we did back when you were with us, right? We did the whole like, hey, we're going to split this up And this cloud side of things, this other side of things, it's over here. And this side is over here. And, like, because this is more service oriented, this is more back end oriented and stuff. And like, you
So
could
it's
look at that and be like, oh, well, it's all IT, and these guys all have similar skill sets. So why are we breaking it up that way? That makes it harder to move people to help in certain situations, right? And it does, but it makes overseeing that work way, way better. It allowed us to start to do like, okay, you can start to plan people's time better and understand what's going on when you're like, okay, you are specializing over here, get this piece done, right? And we're never going to fully specialize, but it matters, and it helps a lot. And we've fought that a few times. Like there have been a few times, and since then too, where we'll have discussions and be like, hey, should we just combine these units? It would make this stuff easier. This problem we're having in this other unit would be solved with another body that, and I think they might have time over there, but it's like, or should we hire somebody different for this unit, right? And actually do it the right way. So does that kind of fit what you're talking about? I think that the key there is the oversight of it, right? Is that you have that oversight of that functional area, and you can branch it out and go, okay, this is what's happening here. This is what's happening here. And you can give that clearer goal and that clearer boundaries, and people know better exactly what they're doing, and there's less floundering at the low level because they're able to get the oversight from somebody who's tracking on, this is your requirement here.
So I'd like to then expand a little bit further on the idea of in charge of, maybe get into some specifics of that. For example, for me, being in charge of means that that person, at least at the manager level or the departmental level, is in charge of process or development of process. Would you agree with that? At what level do you look at someone as far as
that depends on what level of management, but yes, to a certain degree, right?
What's that?
Well, I was saying, so it depends, right? So like, at what level of management you're considering, right? At a director level, for sure. They're at a manager level, some, but probably not all of the process development, right? Because there has to be that level that's understood, that level that knows how to build the things that need to happen at that lower level. But sometimes you need the higher company buy-in.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think of this completely opposite when it comes to the director and manager levels, because I see directors more as generalists who are overseeing managers who are your subject matter experts. Now, in a small business, you are basically having people play both roles. But the distinction that I would make on what role you're in when you're doing work in your day, if you're doing process work, you have your manager's hat on. And when you have your director's hat on, you're seeing more big picture in how those departmental processes will roll up within what we call a business unit, kind of that first breakdown of it. But if you have an organization that's starting to develop its management team, I see the first responsibility they're assigned is in the development of process, because I see them as a SME. The directors are there to coach that. And maybe this is a difference, but like you said, a difference in size of organization.
In terminology too, I think of process and procedure as two different things. And I think what you're talking about in my mind is procedure, right? They're looking at the procedure on how to do the things, whereas I look at process as the flow of how those things work. And so I think the flow is where I was going. So I agree wholeheartedly. I think my terminology in my brain is just different than your terminology.
I love that explanation. I've been kind of struggling with the idea of roll up, and I mean, for me, in my terminology world, it's all about the tasks and
Yep.
functions at the manager level, because it's departmental assignment. And so they're focusing on a more specific aspect of execution, where the director is looking at the results of that. As I roll them up from task into function, that's still a manager's focus or oversight, is what's happening at the results level from a function. And then that, of course, is rolling up or contributing to the whole department's results. That's where the director's overseeing it, that roll up of that execution. Again, this is perfect world, with distinctions through the layers. But I'm trying to coach people into thinking in a small business that you may not have people specifically in oversight, but when you are in that execution, you are changing roles, and it's a different mindset in that. So, but
We call that
go ahead.
positional authority in the Navy.
So oversight, that's
You know what I mean? Like, you have positional authority in that role, and that's where the oversight piece comes in. Because, like, I mean, we just went through chief season, and like one of the things we tell people is like, so if you're doing the training lead, right? If you happen to be in charge of training at that time, like, you are now responsible not for doing the training, but for overseeing it getting done, right? You may do pieces of it, but when you're called out as the lead at any given time, your role shifts from the doer to the delegator. And people struggle with this really bad because they want to just do the thing. And a lot of times we put people into lead roles because they have the skill set to get it done, but that kind of sets them up for failure because they're not very good at delegating at that point. But it comes down to, when you are the lead, and you are responsible for the, like you said, the completion of the thing, not for the completion of the individual tasks. So it's a weird mentality shift, but it's important. But that's where that oversight comes in at a small level, at a lower level in an organization, I think.
I'm going to pop a new slide here. What was my next thought on that?
Sorry, distracted you.
No, that was me. I was trying to, all right. So then the other part of this that we hit on a little bit, but I want to get more specific in it, is then the oversight aspect, and you mentioned it, of people. So my first thing in oversight, as I break that down, is the development of process, that someone who is assigned oversight of, I'm focusing a lot of this discussion really on the manager role, or the oversight of, at a departmental level. And so that can be, like I said, in my mind, it's the director playing that role. And for me, there is the element then of the oversight of people. I think we could do that the same breakout, and the differences between, maybe a director level and a manager. What are your thoughts on that? Or do you want to frame that differently for what your thoughts are?
No, I'm just looking at it and thinking, so, I mean, organizational structure wise, like, it's easy to say like, oh, the CEO is over the directors are over the managers, and then the managers are over their people. But, you could make that distinction, but in a small business, like, you can't separate fully to that degree, right? Like, overall, I'm responsible for, because I'm director and manager, I'm responsible for, all the guys below me and overseeing what gets done there. But there's definitely a sharing of that load. So
sharing of what load? What do you
sharing of overseeing people, of like, so you need, in my opinion, you need other people to be a part of how you're, to fact check yourself and to be able to come back. So, I mean, like I will do in our organization, again, I'm the manager and director, so it's weird. That's why this is harder for to talk about, but like I do.
Do you see value in making that distinction though?
The director versus the manager?
Yes.
Yeah,
Small
well,
business.
so
Please say
no,
yes.
well, hang on. Like, yeah, for especially as you grow, yeah, because they're different, they're doing different things, right? Like there's a significant amount of what I want to do as a director that I can't do when I'm doing manager level stuff, and vice versa. Like you'll notice it, you know, if you're sitting in our office, like at least I notice because I'm hypercritical of myself, like there's an ebb and flow. If I put my attention on this thing over here, then this thing is gonna slip a little bit. Like no matter what I do and how much I train people to kind of fill in on some of those gaps, you know, like if I'm suddenly getting heavy into strategy, you know, I'm betting that if I do that for too long, that some tickets are going to start to fall behind, right? They're not going to get as much attention because there's not as much management. Now, I trust my guys to get stuff done, but human nature, right? Like things will slip by, and if I'm not really focused on that, that's what will happen, and vice versa. So yeah, I think there's a huge need for both. As you know, as you grow, it just really depends on
I
where
just
you're
said for the
coming from.
manager, frontline oversight. Is that what you were just kind of describing, right? You
Yeah.
like the ticket count stuff and
Yeah, exactly. They should definitely be on that. The problem in a small business is that we, at our level, like in our discussions, we understand that strategy is important going forward to really make the company succeed. But I feel like
succeed in
so the
what way?
manager. Okay, I probably made this analogy in other things. I reuse it all the time. So if you think about when I was working on the railroad, right? I was a signalman, and in order to get on the track to fix things, we would have to call the dispatcher and get on the track, which would stop the trains. The trains make the money. The trains are the front line work, right? Doing the strategy, the director level, that's like maintaining the track, right? That's making sure that the track is going where it needs to go. It's kind of a maintenance level. So in a small business, when you're talking dollars and cents and the things that really get people rolling, right? It's sometimes hard to get people to go, yeah, I wanna keep spending our hourly attention, bless me, hourly attention on strategy when you could be doing tangible work that's making money, right? Managers leading their teams are making money. Directors are paving the way for more money in the future. And that's where we go wrap all the way back to this whole oversight thing, right? Oversight starts to slip. You start falling more and more into the manager, you know, the strategy oversight slips. You start falling more into the frontline oversight management, making money. And that's where things kind of start to bleed around, and you got to get the director level back in. But I think that's a place where, like you say, it's important to have a distinction between director and manager, but why small businesses, you know, when you consider the percentage of wage for a director versus the percentage of wage for the rest of your workers, and you're looking at what they're bringing in, sometimes it's hard to get, you know, directors fully separated from the front level work, keeping in mind that the visionary also loves frontline work in 90% of businesses. So that's where their brain also works, right? Like they work on the long end and the task level. But does that make sense? I kind of trailed off in the end.
Yeah,
there, like I always do.
I have a thought. You know, there's at odds, and it seems like in small business, they're at odds in execution between short-term frontline work
Mhm.
and you know, long-term growth.
Yeah. Yeah, because their cushions are smaller than big businesses. And like
Well,
I
let's
look at it. So, oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say one thing, and then it's limited resources.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, we always say that, right? Like the best, the more money somebody has, the more opportunities they have. Like you see that in the entrepreneur world all the time, right? Like that's just how it works. Like opportunities open up as you gain more resources. I kind of look at it too. Um, I talked to this is from an ages ago conversation with my brother about kids, right? How kids freak out when you put them in timeout for like 5 minutes. But if you think of that 5 minutes as a percentage of their life, it's massive. And that's kind of how this works is the percentage of an employee doing a thing in a small business is much greater than that percentage in a larger organization. And that's why we focus so much on individual efficiency of people and are tracking so hard on individual people, and why corporations, the larger they get, the more wasted time that goes into individuals and stuff, because that percentage is less impactful.
Well, that's great. I think though I'm gonna put this over here. That's part of this idea, I think. Okay, so oversight on people, and I'm going to do my next thought and area is oversight on results, and I would say that's kind of the data component. What do you think from that standpoint? I'd like to kind of keep with that hierarchy kind of thought, or framing this in that hierarchy still.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you think as far as results sort of mindset within these different roles?
I'm not positive I'm tracking what you're looking for here.
So and for example, managers, if we go back to the idea that they're focusing on frontline work,
Mm-hmm.
and then I feel like the term I use is the results is to validate. I better oversight on validating results. So really, this is more of a how, I think. We're assigning oversight basically as part of that they're responsible for a result. Like a manager is responsible for delivery for their department.
Yeah, there's delivery of service,
like tickets, or delivery of service for the
mm-hmm.
It's basically the demand, the service delivery, demand generation, which is my fancy word for sales and marketing, and then internal operations. Actually, that's more, I take it back. These are more, these are to me the director level ones. And then specifically to a department, I look at the integrators responsible for seeing results rolled up between and the balance of delivery and demand. I mean, the directors are responsible for specifically seeing the results of, like here you have the service, we would say the client service director, and then the marketing and sales director, and then often the internal operations person is referred to as the office manager. But it depends, So I'm trying to flesh out here just some specifics. What should a director be doing in an effort towards validating results?
Yeah.
What kind
so
of data are they looking at?
I look at this as like, it's a piece of oversight, but you're not really overseeing the results, I guess, in the data side of things. I think companies actually spend too much time here. I think you figure out your KPIs on the front end, and then, you track on them and you talk about them on the back end from a growth perspective. But I think a lot of companies just want to talk about their data all the time. I love data. Don't get me wrong. I'm very, I really, really want more of it. But I think sometimes we get too caught up in that. But as far as because right now we're just kind of describing what each of the roles really is, right? Like you're just saying
well, I feel as part of the
I totally
role,
lost track of my thought. I had a thought and then it went.
well, let me see if I can't bring it back from a standpoint of, when we're assigning oversight, we're assigning, like I said, the first thing to me was process. We're assigning that you're responsible for, or we're asking you to come up with the best way for execution to happen. That's not a frontline person. They're just doing what they're told and they're trained on. And then like I said, I see the directors somebody in the director role is overseeing that happening. The second area is oversight of people and making sure that and they're executing. I think the oversight of results is the making sure part.
Yeah, and I guess that's where I look at it. Maybe I'm getting caught up on the word oversight. So I look at it as all this pieces, all the result is in the beginning, before you're even doing stuff, you've set your goals. And then in the end, did you meet, beat, or fail, right? And so you did the oversight in the middle, like you set your goals, you did the oversight of the processes and how things should work. And then at the end, it's where did things go from there, right? It's massively important to have this piece. And I think that the part that maybe I think that companies, this is why I have a problem with this piece, is companies get so caught up in this piece that they don't actually do a good job, I've seen a lot of times, in setting that initial goal to then measure your KPI against, right? And that's where you end up with a problem, because you need to be able to say, I did great, I did not do great, right? And to give your people that, yep, you beat it by however many days, you didn't, whatever goal is in whatever process or task you're doing, you have to have a standard to hit. And so, then
is benchmarking appropriate word?
Yep. Although I always there's a weird thing in here with this, that it's a tangent, but I always wonder about, so companies always want to get better and better and better. So you set your benchmarks, and then you tell your people to exceed them, and then they do, and then you reset your benchmark, and you keep doing that. And I hate when companies do that. I don't want to do that for my guys, because that's the fastest track to burnout. That I see it happening in a lot of places, and
so what?
It's how
would you go about? I'm getting into a little bit more on. I was going to have a section more on the practices.
Okay, we can come.
But well, how do you go about setting benchmarks?
This is where I definitely struggle on this one because of what I just said. So, I try to look at it.
Let's say in a perfect world, philosophically.
Yeah, in a perfect world, I want to know what I think would be the result. Like if I did things in the right way, I would profit this much from people doing this much work, right? And I'm happy with that number. And then if I can encourage my guys to beat that number, and they do, then that's awesome. I don't need to fill that space with more stuff, right? Like, let people's hard work be a reward for themselves. So to a point, right? There is some moving of benchmarks that has to be done when your estimations were terrible. But you can't cut that fine line to the point where people have to be performing at 110%. So, and that's where it comes down to good KPIs and good benchmarking, right? And understanding your guys' thresholds. And so I try to say tech utilization, for instance, a lot of companies want it to be up in the 80%, and really good companies are up there. I just want my guys utilized, in the 60 to 80 range, right? Anything over, anything getting, was that?
That's such a big debate in any tech company, that number is.
Yeah, well, I look at it as like they're gonna have downtime and spare time and things. And if I run somebody at the razor's edge, then eventually their razor's edge is gonna be at 60%, right? Like they're gonna drop. So there's a number at which I need to be hiring somebody else or whatever. And to me, you start looking into danger zone when you're getting over 70%, because you know, you need people to be able to enjoy their work. It depends on each tech, right? Some techs are really going to hammer it, some are not. Some will always put themselves, they'll just keep asking for more and put themselves above. That's awesome.
So the
But
criteria in that is, let me show one quick thing that might frame this a little bit. So this is a framework that I created around Elliott's hierarchy, and I've simplified it and I've bastardized it to fit small business in my thinking. But if you look at the hierarchy, you know, down here we're talking about, to me, the term benchmarks. With the execution of tasks and results. But the benchmarks are coming from, you know, what the department needs, and the department needs are coming from what was, you know, defined and designated down from the business unit goals, and then the organizational goals. So this is super duper hard, but I philosophically agree with this, but I know it's really hard. So I'm just always trying to come up with, you know, this isn't a perfect world, and there are limits, but is there a way to dissect, you know, where we want to be as an organization from a high level vision, and dissect it down to split it into its integrator. This is integrator to the business units, and then get down to the frontline execution, to be very calculated in benchmarking, to ultimately contribute and roll its way up to accomplishing that growth, and satisfying, you know, the evolution of the organization, all at the same time, you know, satisfying the clients. I mean, does that make sense this way for you?
yeah, well, and that fits, I mean, that fits the whole three hag thing. I've been talking about it and all that, that the stronger your vision, and that's why like people being weak on their long-term big BHAG or whatever is tough. Like the stronger that is, then, because like small organizations, they want to be nimble, they want to be flexible, right? They need to move. So being too rigid in some of the mid-level goals might be a problem, but having a very solid end goal of where you want to be makes it easier to make decisions that stay in line and don't jack up your benchmarks, right? And in a flexible manner. If you know that it should roll down pretty easy when you're getting options to, like, you know, when you're getting new opportunities and stuff. It's when that top, you know, the main vision or even the 3-year isn't very strong that you run into the most problems, I think. And that's where, yeah, that's exactly what you're saying. So this is what you need. And this is why directors, like the problem I was talking about earlier, why businesses need to recognize that that level is worth it, worth the time. It's worth their time and the visionaries' time to focus on this stuff, because it makes the other stuff, the frontline work, more efficient, more profitable. It's less tangible, but it's definitely does that. And that's that strategy at the top level. It really, it just sets the lanes in the road, right?
Yeah, I'm putting it, keeps it in line.
Yeah.
And it also, I like you, what was it? You use swim lanes, right? Keeps people in their swim lanes.
Yeah.
I feel like lately I'm having to defend, in conversation, and you alluded to it a little bit, the value of getting this granular of a mindset in a hierarchy in a small business. And I'm now tasking myself to come up with a version or iteration in an organization where you have elements of these roles, but it doesn't have to be exact, if that makes sense. I talk about this evolution of an organization to where they're starting to grow and you're starting to build an organization, where I think these distinctions become more important. And I'm liking what you're saying about it in support of that. I mean, a strong consideration of the director role is about the disciplining, of work to these goals and ultimately rolling up to that vision.
Yeah. I mean, and that defending can kind of come into, I don't know if you've noticed, like in these conversations, like the feeling that you're getting when people talk about what they're working on, and like, 'cause sometimes you get like a note of almost, I wouldn't say desperation, but kind of, right? Like getting to be like, but I need to do this and I need to do this. And the more people are starting to speak like the need, I feel like what's really happening is that and the more they're piling on too many needs, that's where you start to go, see, this is why you need structure, because you're just piling in more and more needs, but do you really actually need those things? And that there's a release of pain, I guess, when you have that structure you're going for, and when you operate within it. And there's a exponential success, and it kills me because like I feel like I defend this with multiple people because I have conversations outside of work too, right? I could have the same conversation with the same individuals every 3 to 6 months. I'm defending the same concept that you're talking about, like that. Yeah, you need to have your people separated so they can be more efficient. Like they can help each other, but like you can't blend everything together. And yes, you need these goals. And hey, that looks like a great opportunity, but is that really your business model? Right? Like, don't go for that, and especially, small business owners are like, but that's a lot of money I'm leaving on the table. And they've had success taking risks. So they want to keep taking the risks because they've had success. That's how they're still in business. Right. And so sometimes being like, hey, don't take that risk. At the same time, I'm pretty risk averse. So that's a problem there. Right. Like, so I don't know. I agree. I feel like there's a pain point in there where you get people being like, man, I really wish I could, free up more of my time. And I wish I could do this and I wish I could do that. It's like, you can. You just need to allow that this pain up front of building the organizational hierarchy and stuff is worth it.
So this comes back to what we ended, it's kind of an interesting full circle here. We talked about last week, an allocation, almost like a ratio, of frontline resources versus strategic. I basically said there's 3 kinds of work. There's vision work, there's frontline execution, and then there's coordination, or I would just simply say, I guess, the how layer, or the how work. And I left with the thought that it would be cool to come up with targeted ratios around these 3 different areas of work, specifically the last 2, where vision just kind of happens naturally. I think there's more that could be done, more formally with a business owner, but I think overall they have an innate feel for what they want the business to be. They may not be able to always clearly communicate it,
Right.
but that's happening on its own often. But then there's this idea of just, you only have so many employees who only have so much time in a day. And I think what happens is they are just executing and keeping the fort down. And that's along the lines of what's happening here in proof of concept typically.
Yep.
You know, that organization is basically just doing what they can to deliver on their promise. And there's little that's being done to improve, or I shouldn't say little, probably if they have aspirations to grow and be a legitimate company, then you need to invest either time of the people that are currently there, or in investing to pay for more people. And I think that's ultimately what the shortfall is in small businesses. They're not typically willing to invest in the how people. They're mostly just investing in the frontline people. I will say, except for Brian, in your case.
Yeah.
We talked about that last night, that he just has finally, not finally, but he's really, he affirms to me in that he feels very good about the way you spend your time in oversight versus execution. I mean, that how layer is really, this is all about oversight.
Yep.
You know, it's like I said, it's partly you're overseeing the process, you're overseeing the people executing it. And the other part of oversight that I did not put in there yet is a support component, and typically of the people. So I think that's an element of oversight, that when you're overseeing people, to not only just give them assignments, and that kind of pulls all this together, that you come up with the best process possible, you train your people on it, you then validate their performance and your performance really in training as well. But then what do you do when execution falls short of benchmark?
Yep. Internalize it and just eat the pain. No, you gotta have your conversations, right? And that's
Well, I
where,
think it's all about scolding them.
right? Guilt.
What do you
We
think
raise
about
people
that?
on guilt in the Midwest.
How would you approach that?
Honest communication usually. You know, hey, I've got this problem. What's going on, right? And it depends on the situation. I like to have as much data as possible going into the conversation, as prepared to be discussed, right? I don't like
That
to
comes back
bombard
to this
people.
slide. That's where this comes in for me. You know, you have data to support that shortfall.
Right. But to me, so if people are finding out that they're failing at a benchmark when it's failed and not on the way, then you haven't done your job as in oversight.
Can you say that
You
one more
should
time?
be, if people aren't aware that they're failing on their benchmark until it's already failed, then you haven't done your job in oversight. Right?
So it's when to
Like,
address it.
Yeah, earliest possible, right? It should be, hey, like, you know, take a ticket, for example. Hey, this ticket's supposed to take 8 hours. Where are you at on that? Like, if you don't see, and obviously you're not gonna have oversight into every little detail, but if you don't know that people are falling behind on a thing and that they're not gonna be getting their tickets done and stuff, like, why don't you know that? And
basically you're creating a new topic for me here. Check-in. What is appropriate check-in?
Right. And that's a tough one, right? You don't want to micromanage people. I don't want to be that way, but I do want to let them know as early as possible when I'm not thrilled with the performance that's happening. And I start very positive. Like, hey man, I see that there's a little bit of struggle going on here. What can I do to help you succeed here? Right. and I give people the opportunity to ask for help as much as possible. I do believe heavily in giving people the opportunities to succeed, but in order to do that, you cannot fully protect them from the opportunity to fail, right? You can't only put them in situations where they succeed and fill in for them all the time, because then they're never going to fail, and you're never going to be able to teach them why they failed and what happened. And and so like I give all the opportunities I can. Hey, here, do you need help? Do you need help? Do you need help? And that way, the discussion when a benchmark is failed is, hey, so that didn't meet the mark. We talked about it a bunch along the way. Here's where we talked about it, and then you develop a plan. This is what we're going to do to address this going forward, depending on the level of the failure and how often it's happened, obviously. Now we're getting into like the disciplining of people and everything, but I look at it as people growth as much as possible. And then usually if somebody's consistently failing, it's not because of their capability. They're probably not really falling in line with your core values. They have other stuff, and they're not really in it for your team if they're consistently failing, usually. Or you put them in a position where they didn't have the capacity to do it, right? That's the whole gets it, wants it, capacity to do it.
One of the things that I would put in here is that I would add, was it a good benchmark?
That's true. Yep. Yeah, you're right. Because I will amend that. The first thing I'll do if I know that it's my fault is I will not hold somebody accountable to something that I'm aware that was a wag.
And this has me thinking about in reference to this. Then if we did all of this calculation and we worked our way down to determining frontline benchmarks from task execution, and then we determined, wait a minute, this is not going to happen. And then I think we need to roll this thing back up and say, we have to change our vision here. We have to change our goals for the organization for this year anyway. And I wonder if that communication happens in a small business. I think probably because it's so everybody's aware of what's going on.
The vision usually won't change.
The vision won't change, but the goals for that year, so this organizational annual goals, that might change.
I don't think it's discussed as much as you would like. I think they change, and that's where you end up with a bunch of unmet goals that everybody feels are acceptably unmet, which creates the wrong mentality, right?
Yeah,
in small businesses that are not doing this the right way. We struggle with this, and that's why, again, we're going to readdress them later today and have a discussion again of like, okay, because growth, right? As you grow and you're building this model out, you're going to have poorly set goals and things, and it's better to have something than nothing. But you got to make sure to be as accurate as possible and come back and be as data driven as possible on that, so that it's not just, it doesn't become acceptable to just constantly change your goals, right?
Right.
That's a fine line, being flexible and stuff, but that's where you keep the vision, you measure the benchmarks, and then your stuff may need to shift in the midline to be able to get to the right place, but it shouldn't happen by virtue of not meeting your benchmarks. It should happen by virtue of taking the time to actually examine what's going on in your business and saying yes or no, this is accurate, and being strategic about your choice of your goals and saying like, we're going to remove this one for a purpose, or we're going to make this different, right? And it may be a failing benchmarks, but I don't know. It's kind of hard to explain. I'm not wording it right, but really it can't be that things just slide and you're like, yep, you're right. Well, this is not going to be, it needs to be, things are sliding, a real conversation with your leadership team on the side that says, okay, why are these things happening? Is this legit? do we have a problem with our goals? Let's fix them. Let's roll those fixes out and hold ourselves to that to the best of our ability, right? It needs to be thought of as methodical and not as the product of the failures. It has to be, you know, and that changes people's mentality and how it's doing, how it's going. And you don't want people feeling it's acceptable to fail.
It's like reiterating.
Right. The psychological feeling of being methodical, I think, is important.
Allowing or accepting shortfalls.
Or better opportunities, right? But even those need to be examined methodically. Like, you can't just take every opportunity. Even if you got to move quick, you got to say, does this align before you actually take the opportunity? And how is that going to affect all the rest of our goals?
Yeah, so I'm coming back to looking at, you know, a business that's evolving. And I'm seeing that all of this that we just talked about in this, and looking at how that could be specifically applied through the evolution here. You know, is there something that a small business owner can say, I'm gonna adopt this idea of the director, let's say, and this is overwhelming to me. But is there a version of this that could be introduced to them that would help them to build and to kind of move this more formally along? I'm speaking in terms of me, in what I'm wanting to get out of this is different than I think what I'm trying to come up with a solution for others.
Yep.
In this, but yeah, so that's
I mean,
so
I'd like a solution for others because then I can use it too.
right, that's right. So I would like to change over a little bit more. I'm trying to end each of our sessions with you know, practices. You know, we did talk a little bit about that in general terms, but specifically if somebody is looking at wanting to engage in providing better oversight in their organization, what are the things that they can do in the practices of operations? And we kind of hit on a few of them. I'll throw the first one out. You know, create an org chart. And I say, you know, based on a work breakdown structure. That's my way of reconciling those two now, you know.
Yep. Yeah.
So that would be my first, you know, way of saying, here's what you can do. One thing that you can do on that.
I would say before that, you need to know your endpoint.
Have a vision.
Yeah. You need to have that piece. At least it doesn't have to be fully fleshed out for everybody to understand yet, but before the org chart, you kind of need to know where you want to go so you can build your organization in a way that meets it.
This is my long version of this that I say. Create an org chart based on the work breakdown structure, based on your vision, based on your beliefs.
Yep.
So yes, number one, have a vision.
Yep.
Anything, what do you think? Anything else in kind of an operational practice around the idea of requisite oversight?
I mean, we talked about it a little bit, right? You gotta have your goals, like your lower level goals, at which at every level needs to know what they need to accomplish. And that then leads into your designing and defining your KPIs, defining and designing, whatever, doesn't matter. But you need to have those. So then you have data to help people understand where they're standing. Because you want to be able to support people's gut decisions, gut feelings for things.
So then,
At a manager level, be a deck plate leader. That's how you provide oversight. That's a big Navy term. Deck plate leader is getting out and actually like interacting with your people and
What-
knowing what's going on.
what was that word again?
We call it a deck plate leader because
Deck
it's
plate.
Navy. So getting out on the deck plates. It's getting out there and actually, and it's not just doing the work with your people. Some of it is that, but it's knowing what's going on and knowing them in a more personal way so that you know what's going on in their lives and things.
That needs to be up here.
Yeah, and that's how you get into the ability to address issues sooner rather than later, right?
That's kind of about be in the know.
Yeah. That's why on my Monday and Tuesday in the office, I get a lot of meetings done and I get less work done, but I definitely I'll spend time just talking about a freaking movie or whatever. Like I spend time talking with my people about stuff that interests them. And I accept that I'm going to have a harder workload at later times in the week in order to take that time.
So it's
But
connecting.
it's worth it. You need that investment in your people and you know, that connection.
Develop trust.
And this is coming from an introvert, so.
Yeah. So I just came across somebody from Minnesota who has become a national speaker. His name is David Horsehager. I'll send you a link to some of his stuff and his whole. He's an author and speaker, and he's doing some workshops. One is in April that I'm going to around trust leadership. So his whole shtick is how to be a trusted leader, and he has 8 pillars of creating trust in an organization. The cool thing is it really aligned well with what we're doing at Aligned Operations, you know, with our motto of clarity, confidence, and trust. So I think around the idea of trust, it's really good stuff. And what I haven't gotten from him, it's right now, it's been mostly philosophical. I'm trying to get more about what do you do specifically to do this stuff. So, but I think around the idea of, you know, engaging with your team to develop trust, he's a pretty interesting resource I've recently found. Anyway, that was a little bit of a tangent. So back to our practices. So this is kind of connecting with your team.
Yep.
That's partly with kind of casual conversation.
Yep. That includes defending your team from situations that are not ideal, right? Like that's where we talk about the benchmarking. When we know that benchmarking is failing, or you know they're defending them from being overworked and knowing where you're putting your people, it's hard to. But you want your team to feel like what you're doing is defending their ability to do things, and you're making their life better as an oversight. If the more you do that, the easier it is to provide oversight, because people will follow what you're asking more. If you throw them under the bus or you overwork them because you just need it done, there's a certain amount you can do that a certain amount of times, but at a certain point they're gonna stop performing, and that's when you've done bad oversight, right?
Well,
so
again,
it's defending your
it's
people.
back to trust. Those things are you're creating a level of trust.
Yep.
You know, and I'm gonna one of the topics that I came up with around trust, in I think you're alluding to it, in developing that through these things, in defending them and connecting with them. Then trust in assignments.
Yep.
That they may not question things then. You don't, not like you want them to reduce questioning, but you do. I think if you have a high level of trust, you're more likely to just, when someone assigns you work, your manager or whatever, you just do it. What do you think? What do you think about that topic in general?
That's a touchy one. So that's tough, especially in today's generation, right?
Yes, I was just thinking
people are
that.
becoming more and more questioning, and they want to know. But again, this all wraps up, right? So they want to know how they fit into the grand picture more than we traditionally did in previous generations. I'll use the military stuff because it's easy, right? Is we used to just take an order and do the thing. That was on the civilian side too. People say it was just in the military. It's not. People in the civilian side also just did what they were told. Whereas now you want to know how you fit, where you fit in the grand scheme of things. And that's why having a good vision with good goals and KPIs is so important, because then you can say, this is how this fits in if asked, right? Not and you kind of demonstrate it and provide some of that on the front end as much as possible. But I don't necessarily need to reduce all questioning. I want them to ask the right questions, right? So that's where you're talking about reducing, but I want them to ask the right questions to get the job done and to do the things and to feel good. But I don't want them having to ask, should I be doing this, right? Like I want them to just know, like, yeah, I need to get this thing done for him because I know how I fit in already. And that's where that's where these talks and your meetings and everything else should be. People should know where they fit in, and they should kind of know where the business stuff fits in. So when you say, I need you to do this, they can see for themselves quickly, okay, I can see how that fits in.
Right. Well, a better way to put this, I think I just put, was instead of trust is more in confidence, that when you provide as a manager, again, I always say that managers are responsible for creating the best process. And then I think if you're a good manager and you've presented it well and you've done all these things to gain their trust, that you have subject matter expertise, and you've been able to convey that over and over again. When you give them an assignment and you train them on the process, they're going to feel more confident about it. That they're going to say, this guy knows what he's doing. I'm just going to do it. Again, there's a fine line between just the attitude of do what you're told. Wes really struggles, or has struggled with this with a few of his staff, that it's like a full-time job to have to then explain every little thing and why they do it. And I think it is a little generational, where I think my generation was more of, okay, you hired me, I'll just do it. It's my, I was hired to do this. I'm not a manager, I'm just doing it, so I'm going to do it. But I think there is a trust factor that comes into play with this stuff, and maybe that generation isn't trusting of management or of authority.
I don't know, man. I'm not having that problem right now.
Yeah.
In my workplace, while we may not have all our get stuff like in line, and I want to do it more, I'm not currently having the why understanding problem, right? Like I'm not having excessive questions. I would actually like them to ask more questions sometimes.
I was just going to say, I like your idea of asking the right questions,
right?
And I think there is in all of this, there's balance.
Yeah, well, and sometimes if people are asking why they're doing stuff, are your roles and tasks actually defined in the way that you think and well enough for them to understand? Like, if I ask somebody to do something, it's because it fits within what they should be doing. And if it's not, if it's out of the norm for what I think that position should be doing, but it's a small business, I will tell them that, hey man, I know this is a cloud and a data center function, but they're booked. I need help. So can you help us out over there? Okay. Right. Like it's easy. That's not a long conversation. Like, I really need your help over here. Where are you at on your stuff? I could use this, and they do it. But people know what their role and stuff is. And I've had before, like, well, that's not, people are like, I'll give them a ticket. And if I don't talk to them, they may come back and say, hey, how come you gave me this? It's not within my general function, right? That's great. Yep, that's because they're booked over there. Easy conversation. And a lot of times I don't have to have that conversation because they know, that I didn't, they know that I generally assign in a certain way. So if I assign something that's out of pocket, they're going to be like, that's weird.
Yeah.
I need to do that, they should ask a question. Sometimes they'll just get it done, but most times they should, because it should feel weird and they should say that's out of process. Why? And all it should take is because I need it. It's not an accident that I did that. I need it. Okay. But I also ahead of time, right? I had that up. If I'm going to assign something that would require a question, I'm going to send them a Teams message. I'm going to give them the ticket. I'm going to say, hey, this is out of pocket, but I need this, right? I'm just going to say that right on the front end so they know. So
Yeah,
I guess I
think
haven't a lot of whys.
that's great insight for giving me a little bit of clarity on how to look at this. That if you do, that's when they should question. When you're assigning something to them that's not part of their role, it doesn't make sense. It really doesn't align with the organization or the department's or even that function's purpose, what they've been hired to do. That's when they should question.
I would. Sorry, go ahead.
That's a valid place for them to question.
Yeah, I would be willing to bet, having never met Wes, so I do not know. But generally, if you're getting a lot of questions on the why, and if they are in the role and it's within their task, you're probably micromanaging to a level that shouldn't be done. That's my guess, because you're saying, I need you to do it this way. Well, now you're not giving your people the freedom to accomplish a task, right? And to prove to you that they're going to get it done. Now, that's where they might, in a tech world, start asking, why are we doing it that way and not this way? Again, that's a valid question. Why are we doing it that way? Because they need to know. And if you're doing it because that fits what you want your process to be or whatever, then fine. But again, that comes down to, was your process not fully defined before you gave them the task? And now you're having to explain that process. If you had a full out process, then it wouldn't be a problem.
I think
Right.
there's some of that there. I think you're right. There's some of that where the process was in process of changing or being developed with one individual in particular.
Yeah, I want to be clear. I'm not calling him a micromanager. I'm just saying that's where I've run into that in the past, is when I do that. I want to be very clear about that. I'm not.
I think it was a
saying
perfect.
somebody is.
I think in that case, it was a perfect storm of there was some ambiguity or lack of clarity around the process. And then you had somebody who was very intolerant of specificity. And so I think what those two came together was this perfect storm of this person constantly in his ear about how he felt things should be done and questioning how, what was being. So I think it was partly a little bit of both.
That's probably a core value issue too.
Yeah.
In the grand scheme of things, they probably don't, a lot of the times that person doesn't belong, and that they either don't get it, want it, capacity to do it, or they have a value that's different. And that's why the heart of why they're constantly questioning you is that there's a disconnect at a level that people don't necessarily think about or understand. They just feel wrong working together, and that's a core value issue in my mind. So it depends, right?
I don't know. I think what's ended up happening is this person is being considered for the management position because he did bring up so many questions that he seemed to be interested in how the work got done and not just doing it. At least we've elevated to him, or there's a consideration to the lead on the help desk. He's not the manager of support. They've defined the department to support to include the function of dispatch, I think is what they're calling it. Same, as help desk. And this person is now, being considered, or I think they may have already, for that role.
Okay. So in this case, they were actually good questions.
Right.
That you wanted to ask. Okay, well, that's different too then. Okay.
I think it was good questions, but at the same time, it became a burden for Wes to be dealing with and answering them all the time. And some of it, I feel like the questions, there was a little level of excessiveness. I would say a lot of it was valid, but I feel like there was a level of, Wes's response not directly, but indirectly is, hey, we've been doing this for 10 years. Trust us a little bit for now. I don't know if that's the right answer, but that was sort of the mindset that he was in with this guy.
Yep.
But anyway, back to, I add in, I don't know if you noticed while we were talking, I put into our practices to define and affirm roles with the team members. I mean, this is up and down the
Yep.
organization. You
We
know,
talk about that quarterly.
you know, you're visionary to the front line. You know, what does it mean to be a director? What does it mean to be a manager or a lead, or, you know, to be a help desk tech? You know, be specific. I think you nailed that on some of this. Is the more specific, the better the oversight.
Yep.
Anything else? We talked about KPIs. I would say identify KPIs in regular reporting.
Yep. Yeah, I go over the
Looking at
KPIs
it.
weekly. I don't spend a lot of time on it, but I show them what the KPIs are looking like every week.
And that's, I was going to say, that does lead into my proposed topic for next week is data analytics within a small business. What you know, should you be defining? How do you define your KPIs? How do you gather that information? And how do you use it? It's interesting to me that you are kind of downplaying that. It's that you know, maybe it's not done properly, or too much focus on it.
Well, yeah, I'm not trying to downplay it. What I'm saying is I love data. It's very important. But if you don't have the front end work done, what I see a lot of people want to do is they want to have their data, and then like it's not you end up just talking about the data, but with no concrete good, bad, whatever on it, and no concrete benchmarks for people. You're holding them to data that, you know what I mean? Like you just
Got to be
people
relevant.
spin and look at data, but it's like you need functional aspects of it, and it's just easy to get lost, especially with dollar sign data.
I say relevant
Right.
to
I think
the
that is
goals
easy
and
to
vision.
implement. Yeah, I have a problem with it. I actually love my data too much, and Brian will be like, "Can we just make a decision?"
Yeah. Hey, here's
You know,
another
and
one
he's right.
on the connecting with teams. I think you alluded to in casual conversations, but maybe even more specifically in one-on-ones.
Yeah.
Are you doing those very frequently or regularly
Quarterly.
with your team members?
Quarterly.
Yeah,
I mean, I do a specific quarterly meeting. I will, so my meeting tempo is I have for each team, I have the 2 different teams. I do a daily, which is like 15 minutes. And that's just a, hey, everybody, what do you got going on today? Do you have things that, you know, we can help each other out with?
so like a daily huddle.
Yeah, I do one of those for the different teams. And then I do a weekly where we talk about, are you on track on your rocks? Like, how are you guys doing? Do you have any major issues? It's not like the full leadership one. It should only take like 30 minutes unless you guys are really talkative, which is fine. I allot an hour, and I don't do it in the best EOS way, but I want to use that as extra time to just chit chat too. I make sure I have a little bit of bullshitting in every of these meetings just to, again, work with the team on stuff and be comfortable. And then in the world of teams and stuff, I will just connect with people periodically. So I don't consider those one-on-ones. I just will, you know, if I'm going to give somebody a task, I just try to make sure that I have a little bit of conversation with them and stuff too, right? And then, you know, quarterly we have an official one-on-one and then an annual one-on-one. Well, the annual is me, Brian, and them, but it's still, and that way people know if they're on track. And then obviously impromptu, if there's a problem or something going good, I will just grab somebody and pull them aside and say, hey, you're doing great stuff, or hey, there's a problem here.
Okay.
So I don't look at all of those as meetings necessarily, but some of those
I'm just calling it kind of your check-in.
Yep. Yeah, I'd like to. Yep. And Teams makes it easy to just drop a ticket on somebody and be like, what's going on here?
Yeah.
And then I, probably to the annoyance of my text, but I don't care. I will only type a few lines in Teams before I just make it a call.
Right.
Because we're remote, right? Like if we're in person, or, you know, because people will even want to send Teams messages in person. It will not go long before I just stand up and walk over and have the conversation. And I find that that's the most effective.
It's interesting.
Kids these days like to be more text oriented, but
Yeah.
I need to get that face-to-face discussion with people, because it has a different impact. Even if they're used to texting and stuff, it has a different impact.
So I recently, Shabazz sat in on one of our meetings from Media Garcia a while ago. So you did meet him, I believe. And then I recently hired him for kind of my sales coach. He is encouraging me to just pick up the phone. Don't just send emails and don't just do posts and stuff. He's like, if you want to connect with people, you pick up the phone, give them a call, even if it's a voicemail. That just gives such a different, it conveys such a different effect than just another email. So I've been trying to do that more in that around relationship building with prospects and clients for that. So I'm even with Ryan, I'm not doing it just because I'm trying to build a business relationship, but it's a better interaction. Like we get together with them once in a while. So I would like to do more of that actually. I think, but at the same time, I think you need to balance the efficiencies of doing remote. That it's to me, it's not as impactful as in person, but it's a good second, I would say.
Yep. And that's why we do a hybrid. 2 days a week, everybody's in the office. The rest of the time you can be remote.
I think that's a great balance in a way to connect and be efficient at the same time. So I'm going to wrap up here. We got a couple of more minutes. Like I said, I will, I'm proposing for next month. I do plan to host it. It is going to be on the 29th. So it is between, Christmas weekend and then New Year's weekend. I would still like to, if it comes up where we can't do it, let's communicate that. Otherwise, I do intend to hold our regular time, if that works for you, but let me know. The topic again being performance monitoring is the general term that I use for why we do data, to monitor and see how things are coming along from departments to people to the organization and its, the business units all the way throughout for that. So I will send out a notice on that. Any other questions or thoughts that you have?
No, I'm sure I've got plenty, but we've talked about enough.
Yeah. So I will create a recording or save this out and post it to YouTube and send it out as I have been doing in the past for this. I could do my notes as well and post that out there. Although I think it's kind of naturally there with the recordings, I would think. But anyway, if not, I'll let you go. Enjoy your day, and then I will send out a link to the recording.
All right.
All right. Take it easy. Thanks, Dana.
Have a good one.
Alrighty. Bye.